Okay, I think we're good to go. Okay, hi, this is Kathy Dodd. This is a meeting of the Administration Committee of the Wilmette Village Board. I'll ask our village manager, Mike Raymond, to please take. Oops.
All right, I will call the roll. Trustee Dodd?
Here.
Trustee Sullivan?
Here.
Trustee Barrow?
Here.
All right, all members are present.
Okay, great. So let me just start with some of our normal logistics. This meeting is being conducted remotely via Microsoft Teams software. The state of Illinois is still under portions of a stay-at-home order, which was issued by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a result, all in-person meetings of the village have been canceled. The state has amended the Open Meetings Act to permit electronic meetings, and we are conducting our business in compliance with state law and the Opens Meeting Act. This meeting is being broadcast live on local channel 6 and at the village's YouTube page. A recording of the meeting will be archived on the village's website. A remote meeting requires a different mechanic for public participation. So to ensure that our residents and other interested parties have the opportunity to participate in this meeting, we have solicited public comment via email. So if you send an email to publiccomment@wilmette.com prior to the start of the meeting, our staff will read the email during the appropriate portion of the agenda. I just want to ask to make sure that everybody who's in attendance here to mute their phones, because I am hearing a little bit of background noise. I don't know if any others are, just to help make sure for everybody. Okay. Members of the public watching via YouTube Live wishing to comment during the designated public comment period, you may submit comments through the chat feature on YouTube Live, and a member of the village staff will read your comment. For those who have connected via Microsoft Teams or telephone and wish to address the committee, I will ask people to speak when it is time for public comment. Due to logistics and just in terms of how we'll do this, I will ask someone to identify themselves if they would like to address the committee. We will then assemble a list and call on the individual person by person. For people who choose to speak, I would like to remind you that you have 3 minutes following our rules, and comments from the public, no matter how they were received, will be recorded into the meeting minutes as we typically do. So whether you gave us written comments or you'll speak tonight. The agenda materials for this meeting were posted on Wilmette.com Friday of last week. So we provided those in advance of this meeting, so all members of the community had a time to review prior to our meeting today. So, and thank you to those of you who have provided some comments. Before we get started, I just want to thank everybody for attending. And I especially want to thank the staff. Obviously, this is a very busy time for the staff during the pandemic, and this has taken they've done an incredible amount of work in a short period of time. And I know all of us on this committee are very appreciative of that. And the material they put together is very extensive and really fabulous. So thank you to Mike Raymond and your staff for everything you've done to get this meeting organized for us. I think we're really lucky to have such a detailed set of material for us to review. I'd also just like to thank all the residents for your feedback that we've received, and based on the feedback that we have received, I'm feeling happy because I think we're headed at least in the right direction, and we've gotten lots of positive feedback in terms of what we're doing. So with that background, I will move to the second item on the agenda, which is approval of the minutes from our July 6, 2020 meeting. So can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
And then can I get a second?
Second.
Was that a second from Dan?
Yeah, second.
Oh, okay, sorry, I just didn't hear. Sorry. Okay, so Mike, can you please call the roll on the motion to approve the minutes from our July 6, 2020 meeting?
Yes, Trustee Sullivan?
Aye.
Trustee Barrow?
Aye.
Trustee Dodd?
Aye.
All right, the motion carries.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so the next meeting, the next item on our agenda is continuing the discussion of the boards and commissions. Mike, can you pull up kind of just the first page of the presentation for a moment? Okay, so I'd like to just start by kind of reviewing the scope of the meeting today and let everybody know kind of the process of what we're going to go through today. So our goal today is to really review the roles and responsibility of the Housing Commission as well as the Human Relations Commission, and then also talk a little bit about the composition of the boards and commissions in terms of diversity and qualifications to serve on those boards, term limits and length of terms, and then the number of members. So these are basically the three items that we asked the staff to prepare for this. And so we're going to go in a slightly different, I shouldn't say slightly different order, but what we're going to do to get started is, because this is really a working meeting for us, for those of us on the committee, we really want to dig into and kind of make recommendations on what we believe the roles and responsibilities of this Housing Commission, Human Commission should be, as well as the composition of the board. So what we're going to start with is we'd like to open up this topic with public comment at the outset of our discussion so that we can be better informed on our deliberations as the three of us on this committee speak. And so what I would ask those of you who want to speak on this particular topic, I would ask that you please really then give us the feedback or specific on the roles and responsibilities of these, of the Housing Commission, the Human Relations Commission, as well as any feedback on the term limits and the length, and the term limits and the length of terms and things like that. I think at this point we can assume that we're going to be making a recommendation to the board to proceed with this Housing Commission, Human Relations Commission. So we've received feedback from the community how important that is, and so we're going to be proceeding with that. So really the purpose today is really to better understand what we want these two commissions to do and how we can best give that recommendation to the board. So with that, I'd like to remind everybody of what we kind of stated earlier, which is all individuals who'd like to speak are allotted up to 3 minutes to make public comment. And then I guess we'll start by asking people who are watching on YouTube Live. Actually, Mike, are we going to read public comment that we've received first and then ask people who would like to speak? How do you want to do that?
Yeah, so we'll have Alex read the public comments we've received, which will give those following along live an opportunity to type into YouTube Live. So once Alex completes that, he can check YouTube Live, and then at that point you can also ask if anyone on the call would like to speak to the committee via phone or Microsoft Teams. And one thing I would just like to point out for everybody joining us live is that this will be the one opportunity to provide comment on the boards and commissions review to ensure an orderly meeting and to help facilitate the committee's work. We can't entertain YouTube Live comments during the course of the discussion. So if you have something to share, please do so now at the outset of the meeting.
Okay, good. All right, so why don't we start with having Alex read the public comment that we've received via email.
Okay, so we have received several comments to our public comment at wilmette.com email address. I will read them in the order that we received them. Okay, the first email is from Karen Glenmeyer. Dear Village staff and trustees, I fully support efforts to grow Wilmette into a more racially and economically diverse and welcoming community. And I believe it is not enough to simply say that we are so, but we must have policies in place that actively promote this vision. The proposed reinstatements of the Housing Commission and the Human Relations Commission would be important steps in the right direction. If these commissions were tasked with developing policies and programs to improve economic and racial diversity within Wilmette, as well as examining and removing any policies that discourage such diversity. Sincerely, Karen Glenmeyer, 719 Laurel Avenue. Okay. And our next email is from Elizabeth Bennett. I am in support of reinstating both the Housing Commission and the Human Relations Commission. I would like to see them appropriately chartered to tackle the pressing issues of affordable housing and making Wilmette a more welcoming and inclusive community. Although Wilmette has been a wonderful community to live in for 33 years, I don't think we served ourselves or our children well by having almost no people of color as our neighbors or children's friends. The housing costs are certainly a major factor in lessening the diversity, both racially and economically, in the community. We all need to interact with people who are different than us to become better and more tolerant human beings. Thank you, Liz Bennett, 425 Brookside Drive, Wilmette, Illinois. Okay. Next comment comes from Maya Crystal. Dear Administrative Committee, as a resident of Wilmette, I am calling on you to appropriately charter the Housing Commission and Human Relations Committee to tackle the pressing issues of affordable housing and making Wilmette a more welcoming and inclusive community. I would like to call attention to the inadequate job Wilmette has done to create affordable housing. Wilmette has not met the Illinois percentage requirements for affordable housing. I would also like to emphasize that affordable housing projects should not give priority to current residents of Wilmette, as this policy perpetuates racist housing discrimination and attempts to keep Wilmette as white as possible. Thank you, Maya Crystal. Okay. Our next comment was submitted by Kim Sterling. Hello, I support the reinstatement of the Housing and Human Relations Commissions. Thank you, Kim Sterling, 840 Chilton Lane. Our next comment comes from Colleen Shinners. Dear Administration Committee members, thank you for the thoughtful review of the Housing and Human Relations Commissions. As I read the packet of information provided by the village, I was surprised to see that the housing plan is 16 years old and is targeted toward low-income and elderly individuals with no mention of families. I am hopeful that a revitalized housing commission can assess the current affordable housing needs in Wilmette, specifically the housing needs of families. I also hope that many ideas regarding the function of the Housing Commission will lead to actual outcomes in Wilmette. The proposed functions of the Human Relations Commissions are exciting to see. If the Commission is able to implement the goals of promoting well-being, social justice, and equality for all in Wilmette, we will all be better for it. It is critical that both commissions are filled with individuals who have experience and/or expertise, as well as diverse perspectives and an ability to advocate for the best interests of all Wilmette residents. I wholeheartedly support the reinstatement of both commissions. Thank you for your service. Sincerely, Colleen Carey Shinners. Okay, our next comment was submitted by Amanda Hoffmeister. To whom it may concern, I'd like to encourage the village board to reinstate the Housing Commission and the Human Relations Commission in order to address the important issues of affordable housing and making Wilmette a more inclusive community. Sincerely, Amanda Hoffmeister. Okay, our next comment was submitted by Amanda Doblin. To whom it may concern, as a resident of Wilmette and a believer in equality, I am writing to voice my approval in favor of reinstating the Housing Commission and the Human Relations Commission. I believe both of these commissions will address the pressing issues of affordable housing to make Wilmette a more welcoming and inclusive community. Wilmette needs to critically address issues of systematic racism and inequality. Both commissions play a critical role in taking the first step into building a better, more welcoming, and inclusive community for our children and future generations. Thank you, Amanda Doblin, 1307 Maple Avenue. Our next comment comes from Lisa Acker. As a resident of Wilmette, I feel it is incredibly important to have more affordable housing in the village to make Wilmette a more welcoming and inclusive community. I encourage you to reinstate the Housing Commission and the Human Rights Commission and fully staff and utilize these two committees. They have a critical role to play in Wilmette. Thank you to the village for putting together the July 14th report on the history and status of affordable housing in Wilmette. It was very helpful to understand where we've been, the roadblocks that have existed in the past, along with the successes with the recent Cleveland Place approval and the Optima credit. I look forward to hearing more about the new comprehensive plan will evaluate and address these issues, leading to more inclusive goals and policies when it comes to housing. Lisa Acker, 1631 Forest Avenue. Okay. Our next comment comes from Nancy Maldonado. As a 5+ year resident of Wilmette, a Latina/Puerto Rican, and a mother of Black children, I support the reinstatement of the Human Relations and Housing Commissions. We moved here only for the schools and the proximity to the city where I commute. The lack of diversity and inclusion is a huge negative that has affected my children. It is not just economics/lack of affordable housing that keeps families of color out of Wilmette. It is the homogenous demographic, historically buttressed not only by redlining, but restrictive covenants, and that Wilmette lags behind in inclusion efforts. Families of color choose to go elsewhere. I would like to see steps in favor of community education and inclusion beyond tokenism. Re-engaging these commissions would also be a step in the right direction. And board members should be diverse, race, ethnicity, gender, age, ability, and more, and represent different perspectives. Thank you, Nancy Maldonado. Okay. Our next comment was submitted by Nicole Zamir. I respectfully urge you to take immediate action to drastically increase affordable housing in Wilmette and thus work towards ending segregation. The segregation in Wilmette came about through racist policies of redlining, so we have a moral imperative to make proactive policies to reverse decades of discrimination. Whites hold 7 times the wealth of blacks due to racist policies that allowed whites to accumulate generational wealth and denied the same for blacks. For the village to take no action or little action is not acting neutrally. It's continuing a racist policy. Does Wilmette want to be a progressive community which welcomes not just our grown white children, community teachers and public servants, but Black and brown people, including those working in restaurants and who we entrust to take care of our children? Many of our unconscious racism fear crime, but crime correlates with poverty and unemployment, not race. Poor, middle-income Black and brown people have so much to offer. I knew of a black family who lived in Wilmette whose teen son was stopped by police asking what he was doing when he was just riding his bike. I have talked to black people from Evanston who have never been to the Baha'i Temple because they are scared of what might happen to them in Wilmette. Please take bold actions to help Wilmette become racially and economically inclusive. Please ignore voices, both those spoken and unspoken, of racist fears and opposition, and do what you know is right. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Nicole Zamir. Okay, our next comment was submitted by Luella Levy. To the Wilmette Village Board, I strongly support the reinstatement of the Housing and Human Relations Commissions. I think they should never have been discontinued. I also support more development of affordable housing in Wilmette. Unfortunately, we have not been a welcoming community as I hope we will become. Sincerely, Luella Levy, 726 Greenleaf Avenue, 40-plus year resident in Wilmette. Okay. Our next comment was provided by Gail Schechter. Dear Administration Committee of the Village of Wilmette, I am heartened to hear that the Administration Committee is paving the way toward reestablishing a Housing Commission and a Human Relations Commission for Wilmette. I have extensive experience in fostering diverse and inclusive communities, particularly through fair and affordable housing policies and practices. I also lived in Wilmette for 14 years, and my parents still live in the village. I can attest that it is absolutely essential for a municipality to have a public body charged with ensuring and monitoring the village's housing stock, and to have another public body that is charged with building, understanding, and appreciation for diversity of all kinds. I focus my comments here in support of the Human Relations Commission. A Human Relations Commission is more than just a Black or Asian History Month organizer. It is the village's advisory body, and in many cases, facilitator, for all matters pertaining to human rights, conflict resolution, and making democracy function for all. Such a commission ensures no one is marginalized or left behind. Again, I send you attached a hyperlink to the Justice Department's guidelines for effective human relations commissions. I suggest that the village board, in deciding whether or not to reestablish a Human Relations Commission, if there is any village staff position, department, or commission that is fulfilling any of these roles as indicated in the DOJ guidelines. To promote and assist in developing an environment of fairness and respect among citizens by ensuring that responses to acts of inclusion, bias, and discrimination are meaningful and consistent. To develop ways to measure and monitor community relations, race relations, and civil rights issues, particularly those that are sources of intergroup conflict. To involve all segments of the community in understanding and appreciating the benefits of positive intergroup relations. To offer a range of programs and services that help communities prevent and resolve issues of human relations, race relations, and civil rights. To develop ways of anticipating, preparing for, and relieving community tensions arising from intergroup conflict. I would remind the village board that it was the village's Community Relations Commission, as it was then called, that facilitated a whole set of programs to fight white supremacy beginning in the spring and summer of 1999, when local followers of a hate group spread leaflets throughout the village and were responsible for shootings throughout the North Shore, including the murder of Black coach Ricky Birdsong. I was at the Wilmette Town Hall meeting describing this article, Town Leaders Not Taking Racist Threat Lightly, facilitated by the Community Relations Commission, chaired by the late Bobby Friedman. Then President Nancy Canifax, the Commission, and the head of the Religious Leaders Association drafted a statement that was hand-delivered to every resident denouncing racism and bigotry and committing the village to eradicating hate. Diversity can only flourish where people with different backgrounds are not merely tolerated but welcomed. Wilmette's Unity and Diversity logo that I inserted here was used in banners lining Green Bay Road and other commercial streets, and as the vehicle sticker icon. It was a proud moment for Wilmette, and it was an initiative for the Community Relations Commission. A Human Relations Commission is the means, as indicated by the Justice Department, to promote ways in which people and communities learn to get along and to safeguard equal opportunity for all. By using the tools of fact-finding, staff training, information sharing, community education, mediation, cultural literacy, hate crime response, and conflict management. There is no other body in Wilmette that accomplishes these tasks, which is why they have languished since the commission disappeared. Thank you in advance for reestablishing the Wilmette Human Relations Commission. Sincerely, Gail. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Sorry, just 1 second. Okay, our next comment was submitted by Catherine Bunton. To members of the Wilmette Board, I fully endorse the letter sent to the board by Gail Schechter. The reasons to reestablish a Human Relations Board cannot be expressed better than they are in her inclusive letter. Please make Wilmette residents proud of living our values of fairness in government and inclusiveness in our community by ensuring the mission of a Human Relations Commission as described here. A Human Relations Commission is the means, as indicated by the Justice Department, to promote ways in which people and communities learn to get along and to safeguard equal opportunity for all by using tools of fact-finding, staff training, information sharing, community education, mediation, cultural literacy, hate crime response, and conflict management. I agree that there is no other body in Wilmette that accomplishes these tasks. We need your leadership to remedy these issues, and I, as a Wilmette resident, will appreciate your vote to correct this deficiency. Respectfully, M. Catherine Bunton, 404 Skokie Court. Okay. Our next comment was submitted by John Jacoby. All. Nancy Canifex shared with me her email to you. I agree wholeheartedly with Nancy's recommendation. I also believe that the Human Relations Commission should be reinstated. Nancy didn't mention that the village's affordable housing plan would be an obvious subject for Housing Commission deliberations. I look at these commissions as bodies of citizens with broad authority within their purview to initiate projects, study issues, listen to residents, and make recommendations. If they verge off course, the village board can guide them back or say no and explain. Their active existence contributes to transparency and citizen participation. Thank you, John Jacoby. Okay, our next email was submitted by Eve Williams. Dear Trustees Dodd, Barrow, and Sullivan, thank you for the work you do in Wilmette. I've been a resident of Wilmette for 23 years, and I've raised 3 children here. I also served in the Wilmette Youth Commission for 6 years, not long after I moved to Wilmette. I am strongly in favor of reestablishing both the Human Relations Commission and the Housing Commission. The Human Relations Commission could act as an advisor to the village board on issues revolving around human rights, race relations, civil rights, and conflict resolution. With regard to the Housing Commission, such a body could evaluate the housing inventory availability in Wilmette and update the village's affordable housing plan to further the village's goals to be welcoming and inclusive. Also, I would consider adding youth members, perhaps non-voting, to each of these commissions. When I was on the Youth Commission, we had several non-voting youth high school members who shared invaluable information with us about what was going on in the schools. Being on the commission was beneficial to them too, to learn about local government. The youth of today will be the leaders of tomorrow, and they often offer fresh voices and ideas that can be incorporated in planning. The reason I suggest including them as non-voting members of the commission is that their school priorities sometimes prevent them from attending all the meetings, and we want to be sure there's a quorum for meetings. Thank you for your consideration, Eve Williams. Okay, our next comment was submitted by Lolly Watt. I'm ready to share my thoughts on what would make a future Housing Commission and a Human Relations Commission meaningful and effective. Number 1, these commissions must have robust, meaningful charters. Yes, they can advise the village board on specific areas where they have expertise, but they should actually be advocates first and foremost. They should be committed to a diverse, inclusive, equitable community where people of all ages, income levels, ethnicities, and races are able to live, work, and thrive as full contributing members. This requires not just the creation of an affordable housing commission, but also ensuring that all cultures and people are truly celebrated and valued. One should not need to attend a local house of worship to feel like one belongs. One should not need to play golf or paddle tennis. Number 2, a diverse group of people should have a seat at the table. Commission members should include young professionals, those with deep roots in Wilmette, and recent arrivals. Foreign-born residents, 17% of our population, should have a voice as should those with disabilities and special needs. People who identify as a race other than white, 20% of our population, should be able to look at village boards and commissions and see people who look like them. The processes and qualifications for appointment should be transparent. They should be based on what one knows and not who one knows. Voters, not businesses, should have the strongest voices. If the commissions are set up in this way, they can truly transform Wilmette and set it up as a shining example of what a small, successful suburban town can be. Everyone would benefit from that. Thank you for your work on this critical issue. Best regards, Lolly Watt, 811 Chilton Lane. Okay. Our next comment was submitted by Annabelle Miller. Hello, my name is Annabelle Miller, and I am a rising junior at New Trier High School. I am writing to the village because it has come to my attention that the Housing Commission and the Human Relations Committee are not valued appropriately, and Wilmette does not have the affordable housing I believe would be so beneficial. I feel that affordable housing should be a priority because it is truly the only way to make our community more diverse and inclusive, and no one seems to be taking charge and making progress on that front. I want to live in a Wilmette that I am proud of, as opposed to a Wilmette that stands by idly and looks at the lack of affordable housing lightly, while continuing to perpetuate the idea that living with people that are extremely similar to you is, for some reason, better than the opposite. Creating more affordable housing would only serve to improve the community, and I would like to see the village working to do just that. It is crucial these commissions be reinstated and given priority. Sincerely, Annabelle. Okay. Next email was submitted by Sherry Medwin. Dear Administration Committee of the Village Wilmette, I was hoping to attend Thursday's meeting but found that I have a conflict, so I submit these comments in writing instead. As a longtime resident of Wilmette, I am encouraged by your work in reinvigorating the Housing and Human Relations Commissions. Although many of us have been living in isolation for 5 months, we don't live in a vacuum, and in the broader context, I hope Wilmette will take a firm stand against the segregationist ideology spewed out of the White House. You know, people fight all of their lives to go into the suburbs and have a beautiful home, Trump said during a recent talk in Texas. There will be no more low-income housing forced into the suburbs. It's been going on for years. I've seen conflict for years. It's been hell for suburbia. Earlier that day, he tweeted that suburbanites would no longer be bothered or financially hurt by having low-income housing built in your neighborhood. Please do not allow the Village of Wilmette to be tainted by this characterization of suburbia. President Trump's implicit classification of Americans into two groups, people who have beautiful homes in the suburbs and the low-income trespassers who must be kept out, does not and should not define who we are as a community, and both the Human Relations and Housing Commission should focus their efforts on combating the hideous portrait of suburbanites. While your attention to procedural details is necessary and appreciated, I do hope that you will not lose sight of the overarching goals of these commissions. We entrust the character of our community to you and trust that you will represent us honorably. Sincerely, Sherry Medwin, 848 Park Avenue. Okay. And our next email was submitted by Monica Rodriguez. I write in strong support of creating a Housing Commission and Human Rights Commission. I urge that part of the charge of the Human Rights Commission is to undertake a study of the racial history of Wilmette, which would provide the context and further actions necessary to create any further actions. The Commission should also be charged with identifying values and principles of governance and business that provides a context of racial justice and social economic equity. Monica Rodriguez, 205 6th Street. And those were all of the emails we received at the publiccomment@wilmette.com email address.
And we did receive one more, Alex, while you were reading it, so I can read it. It's from Leslie Wayridge, and she was trying to type on YouTube Live and didn't seem to be working. I did test YouTube Live, and that feature is working, so Alex will check that while I read this. But the comment is, in addition to the agenda item composition of these commissions, I hope members of this committee plan on discussing the selection process as well today, as that has been a strong concern by many of us in this community. I hope a new and improved selection process will be part of the board proposal. And that was from Leslie Wayridge.
Okay, thank you, Alex. That was a nice, you had a lot of comments to read. Quite impressed by that. Okay, so I guess at this time I'd like to ask, did we get any comments through YouTube Live that we would like to read?
Other than Mr. Brayman's test comment, no, we have not.
Okay, great. So then I will ask people then who would like to speak to us. They could at this point unmute their phone or whatever, and just right now we'll just take a list of names of people who would like to speak, and then we'll just call on you one individually. So is there anybody who's on the phone or joining us, I guess, through Microsoft Teams the same way, right? If anybody would like to actually speak, in addition to the comments that were already read, please speak your name now. We'll give people a few minutes.
It looks like Mr. Gilmore may be trying to speak, but it's muted. Alex, does he have to press, is it *67 on the phone if he's on the phone?
I believe it was just *6 on the phone. And then, yeah, if he can unmute himself on Teams, he should be able to speak as well.
So let's wait a minute to see if he can do that.
Alex, could maybe try explaining how to unmute yourself on Teams real quick?
So if you hover your mouse over the team screen, you will see a little bar pop up at the bottom of your screen. And on that bar, there is a microphone icon. And if you are muted, you will see just a line through that microphone icon. And if you just click that microphone icon, it will unmute you. So you should be able to speak. So if you just hover around the screen, at the bottom of the screen, you should see this little bar pop up.
Trustee John, while Mr. Gilmer is trying that, it looks like Peter Son-Orr was raising his hand via Teams.
Okay.
I think he is interested in speaking.
Okay, so should we assume Mr. Gilmer would like to speak and we can have Peter start? Is that okay with everybody? And is there anybody else? I'm not, let me look at something. Yes, I see Peter Son-Orr raising his hand. I actually don't, okay. Okay, so are you guys okay if we have Peter start, and then hopefully by then Mr. Gilmer can can figure out how to make his comments if he'd like to?
Yep, let's do that.
Okay. Peter Orr, if you would like to speak, please take yourself off mute, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Can you folks hear me okay now?
Yes.
Excellent. I just wanted to, I know I submitted a comment, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but I just wanted to thank all the administration committee members for their work, and the village staff for such a nice job with the reports. I just want to add that in my conversation with members, residents of Wilmette, and their conversation with other residents of Wilmette, there's been, as I think evident by the number of comments, very strong support for both commissions being reactivated with real authority, with real mission statement, and real resources. The unfortunate thing, and I actually had to have this meeting muted while I was attending to other things until right now, is because obviously at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday, I know many people want to participate and be here live because they feel being present live is a real strong showing, but unfortunately they were unable to, and I don't know how it can be done. I know the trustees are doing this in addition to what you folks normally do, but the lack of participation in these live proceedings, I think, would be increased if they were held at a time when more people could participate. So I would just encourage thinking about that. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Mr. Gilmer, are you able to unmute your phone and speak to us? It would be helpul actually, Mr. Gilmer, even if you don't want to speak to us, to unmute your phone and say you didn't mean to raise your hand, just so we know, so we don't feel that we're not letting you have the opportunity.
All right, well, it doesn't seem like it's working, but we'll reach out to Mr. Gilmer after the meeting and get his comments, and we can share them with the committee and post them as well.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Then with that, thank you for everybody who spoke. I'm going to start to turn this over to, so I'll close public comment actually then and turn this over to Mike Brayman to continue with the presentation. I did want to just speak to one thing that came up in public comment, which was the focus of this committee. And I did want everybody to know that we will be addressing the selection process. So that'll be at our next meeting. You'll see that as we get to the next step. So this committee will look at the current selection process and make recommendations to the board if we deem it there is something that should be changed. So it's just not something that's going to be covered in today's meeting, but it is will be covered in the scope of our particular what we're trying to accomplish. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to you, Mr. Brayman.
Okay, I'm going to pull the presentation back up here.
Perfect.
All right, can everybody see the screen? Yes. Okay, I see that heads nodding, so very good. All right, so Trustee Dodd has already addressed the scope of the meeting, so we'll start with the discussion of the Housing Commission. We'll then pause there for discussion and deliberation by the committee prior to moving on to the discussion of the Human Relations Commission. We'll pause again to discuss and deliberate, and then we'll move on to the composition of boards and commissions. So in changing slides here, the purpose of the Housing Commission, and this was also included in the memorandum as part of the meeting materials. I'm not going to read it word for word, but the purpose is to present to the village board recommendations regarding affordable housing, and then to review those recommendations periodically and make updates to them to the village board. So as part of our efforts for today, what we're really looking to do is to identify and establish what the roles and responsibilities of the Housing Commission should be moving forward. And the materials, and we've talked about in the past, that the Housing Commission had primarily been focused on the Housing Assistance Program over the past decade, and then hasn't met recently since that function has been handled by a private not-for-profit corporation. So I've worked with our community development team, John Adler, who's on this call as well, and his staff, to come up with what we believe are appropriate functions for the Housing Commission moving forward. And if there's consensus by the committee, once we discuss these and review them, the recommendation would be to forward these to the village board, which would then become adopted as part of the village code. So you would have that mission and purpose of the Housing Commission that we just saw on the previous slide in the code, followed by specific functions that are bulleted. And these were the suggestions that we had as staff. I'm not necessarily going to walk through all of them. I don't think I need to read the slide to everybody, but they are pretty all-encompassing, and it's a significant scope of work. So I think one thing that's important to point out is that we do not and cannot expect the commission to take on all of these functions right off the bat. So these are listed in what staff believes to be kind of an order of priority, starting with working with SEPA on the Optima development and ensuring that community land trust is implemented in the fashion that we had envisioned. And at the same time, because some of these tasks can work concurrently, would be to start working on the housing chapter of the comprehensive plan, and that really would start this fall, and working with staff and reviewing the housing portion of the RFP. So we're going to have to put a request for proposal out on the street to hire a consultant to help with the comprehensive plan. Part of that RFP will be to address the housing chapter. So we would like to bring that draft RFP to the commission for their review and comment. And the housing needs assessment as well, that's something we would look to the Housing Commission to determine whether that should follow the comprehensive plan, should go before the comprehensive plan, or work in conjunction with it. We'd really like the expertise of the individuals that will end up being appointed to tell us when that housing needs assessment should start. And they, coordinating with Housing on Wilmette is also something that we see happening early on as well. Some of the other items further down, we certainly expect to get to, but I think that will come with time, especially as we review our comprehensive plan and our needs assessment and look at updating the affordable housing plan. The rest of those functions kind of fall in line after that. So I think one thing I'd like to do, and I had distributed additional agenda material earlier in the day, is to highlight a summary of comments that we've received from members of the community. One of the things the committee had asked was for resident feedback on these roles and responsibilities. So Trustee Dodd, would you like me to pull those up now, or do you want to discuss these first?
I think, actually, maybe I would just ask, I would just like to see if Peter or Dan have any feedback on these specific items first, if that's okay with you.
Sounds good.
So I just want to say that, I think, thank you to John Adler and those. I think that this is a really nice, comprehensive list of things. It shows that there's a lot of work that can be done by the Housing Commission. It clearly shows that there's some work that can be done and recommendations that can be done around affordable housing. So in terms of this list, I have a couple of minor tweaks, but I feel it's relatively comprehensive, and I wonder if Dan and Peter concur with that.
I guess I'll speak since I didn't hear Dan.
I would also concur that this is a comprehensive and very valuable list of additional functions that the Commission can undertake. I do have a question for Mr. Brayman, and it's a request. Could you speak to what you think the timing for the work and the contribution of community partners likely will be, since that one is listed as first?
Sure, that's dependent on, first we have to do a final approval of the Optima PUD, which is anticipated for August or September. They would then submit their building plans for permitting, and they are required to make their $1.6 million contribution when they pay for their permit. So in my discussions with Optima, that's probably a early spring of 2021 project. So it's very possible or likely that the comprehensive plan may flip up to number one, just depending on time. We'd have to see, depending on when Optima submits their building permit.
Thank you. I'm really very pleased with this, all of the bullet points here. It's so much more comprehensive than the simple paragraph that's currently the description of the role of the Housing Commission. This really shows a lot of areas where real contribution can be made. So thank you all for doing that.
I would agree. I think, echo what Kathy and Peter said. It's a good list of what you sent out this afternoon. Further refine that with more details, so I like that. My one question, Mike, when we say on the fourth bullet down, I mean, how do we see this commission coordinating with Housing Our Own, and what the influence is? Because I think that's something we should just be clear of. Is this commission direct Housing Our Own, or does Housing Our Own remain independent and they make the decisions and allocations of funds? And how do we see that? Where do we see their overlap there?
Sure, that's a really good question. Housing Our Own would remain its independent, not-for-profit body. I think it's appropriate, that Housing Our Own, make an annual report to the community, and that could be done through a presentation to the Housing Commission. And also, once we have a needs assessment and we really find out where our needs are, if those needs are different than how the Housing Assistance Program is currently structured in terms of who it provides funding to, the Housing Commission could, provide a copy of that needs assessment to Housing Our Own with suggestions on possible changes or expansions to the program.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. Again, I just think we need to be crystal clear of where the two are separated, where there's overlap, so, because I can see that getting muddied in the middle there.
Yes, good point. We'll make sure that when we're bringing language to the village board, we'll make sure that we're clarifying.
Yes. I think that's a great question. And I think, Mike, we can turn to the next slide, but I do think, given that we think it's most likely that the Optima project probably will get started sometime in spring of 2021, and we want these to be somewhat listed in order. I would recommend that we put bullets 2 and 3 as 1 and 2, and then move working with community partners as 3, just so that it's clear, because we don't want the commission to be waiting until spring of 2021 to do some work.
Sure, absolutely, we can do that, and we'll make sure staff too is that once the commission's filled with members, that we'll be scheduling a meeting to talk about what's coming up, and the comprehensive plan draft should be close to ready probably around the same time. But yes, absolutely, we'll do that. And one thing I neglected to mention, the last bullet point: submit an annual report. It's annual, so that was something we'd expect to do right off the bat after the first year, even if we haven't. I don't expect we're going to get through all these bullet points in 1 year. It's just not realistic. But we would expect an annual report, and I think not just for the Housing Commission, but we should look for annual reports from similar bodies like the Human Relations Commission and the Environmental and Energy Commission as well, being submitted to the Administration Committee for review and discussion each year.
That's great. I think that's great. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and then I'm going to pull up the memo that includes the summary of comments from the community on this.
So Mike, do you want me to, yeah, I can see these.
Okay.
Do you want me to speak to these a little, or do you want to provide some perspective? Maybe you could just talk about what's on, how we got this list so that members of the community understand.
Sure. So when we sent out the agenda materials last week, we had asked residents who had indicated an interest in following this topic to please participate and submit ideas they may have for roles, responsibilities, functions of each commission by Tuesday, so that we could share them with the committee in advance and have an informed discussion. So we did receive a lot of really helpful and good feedback, and we wanted to summarize it to help facilitate the discussion. So these are taken from various emails that we've received. I think a number of them are already addressed in some form or fashion in the slide we had just looked at in the functions. But if there's any that the committee would like to dive into in greater detail, or to maybe to add to the functions, I think this would be an appropriate time to have that discussion.
Okay. So I'll start it off, and then I'll look for Peter and Dan to kind of provide some perspective. So I agree with Mike that most of these here are kind of are included in potentially other functions, or are happening in other places. But I'd like to just address a couple of them. So the second bullet, which talks about providing stronger language in regards to the Commission's involvement in the comprehensive plan, and as well as making recommendations. I think that if you look at the actual mission of the Housing Commission, it's very clear that the Housing Commission's mission is to make recommendations to the board regarding affordable housing. So I don't think that we need the language to be much stronger than that. I think it's really important that we have a purpose that kind of gives the overarching goal of this commission, and with that being to make recommendations to the board, I think that'll address I'm here. There's some background noise. Okay, so I think the other ones we've discussed, are included a little bit. I would like to ask Mike Raymond if you could speak a little bit to the topic around monitoring Cleveland Place. Okay, I was going to ask somebody to mute their phone, so thank you. Just monitoring Cleveland Place and other affordable housing developments, obviously that's very important. So once, we put in affordable housing and get monitoring them, can you speak to where that particular responsibility lies?
Sure. So this was a discussion that we had as staff as we were preparing the functions. The Village Green Atrium was specifically called out as a function to monitor and report back. And the reason being is that in the condo declarations at the Village Green Atrium, the village has a specific responsibility or role to play in purchasing units if we need to keep them affordable. Other types of affordable developments in town, such as Malincrot or Cleveland Place, or just any general affordable apartment or house, there is no formal or official role for the village to play. So there's, whereas the Village Green Atrium, we could take action to address an issue. We can't do that at Cleveland Place, and the monitoring of that is certainly done by the state, because they're receiving state and federal tax credits, which means they have to keep the units affordable for those tax credits. So it's being monitored, it's being reported back through IDA, through their affordable housing statistics and reports, and it's also monitored through our efforts to make sure that we're keeping, one of the tasks for the commission was to make sure that we're keeping existing units affordable. So we'll be monitoring that on an ongoing basis. So that's why we didn't specifically call it out, I think, given our lack of authority or control there. But it certainly is appropriate for the Housing Commission to monitor all affordable developments and units in town to make sure they remain affordable and they're functioning in the way that they were designed to.
Great.
Sorry, Kathy, I'm confused now. Because the word monitor, is that a responsibility of the Housing Commission, or is that a responsibility of the village staff?
Yeah, I think it really is village staff. Even at the Village Green at the atrium, the staff's going to monitor the sales, and we would report, what the results to the Housing Commission. So yeah, I think when we talk about monitoring, it's done at the staff level, and then the commission's receiving reports. So maybe we can look at tweaking some of that language a little bit.
Yeah, I think I would just maybe change the word monitor. It's review, assess, whatever. But there's really, monitor just makes it feel like, is there a certain authority that the commission may not have?
But I'm not, okay, so I want to make sure I understand. don't know if that was me and echoes.
What's that?
Can you guys hear me okay?
There's been an echo here.
When I speak?
Yeah, right now. But go ahead.
Okay, sorry. What I was going to say is, this monitor Cleveland Place and other affordable housing developments, I don't think that is a responsibility of the Housing Commission. I think that is more of a responsibility of staff, which is why I don't think we would include that on the list of functions listed for the Housing Commission. That's what I'm...
Yeah, and I think the difference with the Village Green Atrium is that if, in our review and assessment, if they're not being maintained affordable, there's actually actions that we can take that the Housing Commission would recommend. Whereas with Cleveland Place or another development where we don't have control, there is no action or recommendation that the Housing Commission can recommend we take to address the issue.
I think Trustee Dodd and I are saying very much the same things. It's what's the point of this commission monitoring affordable housing that's already been established? Because I guess the whole point of monitoring is if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, all things are fine. It's if they're not following what they've committed to do, that then goes to the village staff. That's going to report to the village board and take whatever ramifications are in the code. So I think Kathy and I are.
I talked through this a little bit with Mike Freeman. So if we have a new affordable housing, a new development, and there's a component of that has an affordable housing component, the staff will have to be monitoring that, because when they submit their permit, the permit will identify the required affordable housing components, and then once they put that affordable housing in, they'll be getting state funding to continue to support that. So as soon as they deviate from that, we would be informed, the staff would be informed naturally.
Yeah. And I guess I would add that I concur that there isn't a monitoring function here. There may be statistical information that they analyze or review, but it certainly isn't monitoring what's going on.
And I think some of that can be handled under one of the items that is already listed, which is research methods to preserve existing affordable housing units. So, I mean, they'll be at least addressing that. Okay, so then so are we ready to move off that one, you guys? I think we're in agreement to not include that on the functions.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so then the one recommendation that I believe that did come in, which was potentially to do some public education regarding the fair housing laws and its history. And I think because we want to really start to focus a lot on affordable housing and what we're trying to accomplish, it seems like some public education regarding that would be important. And so I am recommending, we have that listed here about conduct public education regarding fair housing requirements. I'm just wondering if we should make that a higher priority, and how you guys feel about that.
Where did it fall in the prior slide?
Yeah, can you go back to that slide for a minute, Mike?
Sure. All right, is that up?
It's basically the second to last bullet.
Yeah, got it.
And so it's listed here. I think the request was just to, put this higher on the priority list, and I'm thinking that's a good suggestion. And I just want to, and then I think if we think that's a good suggestion, we can have staff play around with exactly where it goes or whatever. But these are intended to be listed to some degree in order of importance.
Yeah, Trustee Dodd, I think it's a fine suggestion. It's an important thing, and let's not have it be at the bottom.
Okay. And Trustee Stoll, do you have any issues with that?
I have no issue with that.
Okay, Chris, so then if we're okay, I think that we've got good consensus on the mission and the functions of the Housing Commission, so I think we can move on to human relations.
Great, and before we move on, Alex was able to get Mr. Gilmer's public comment in email, so we'll have Alex do that.
Okay, he did email me, and I actually, looking at the participants, I believe he's still in here, and he's off mute now, so if you would like to speak after I read. But the email I received from Mr. Gilmer, thank you. It is very frustrating, but I can now see you on my computer and hear you on my phone. I'm not sure if I can speak, but both commissions are very important. I think that Wilmette should activate them again, Van. I believe, Mr. Gilmer, I think you were I was about to say, I think you were unmuted for a quick second, but at least that's the comment I received on the email address.
Okay. So with that, we'll update the Housing Commission functions based on this discussion, and that'll become part of the committee's final report to the village board. We're going to hold off and we'll report everything to the board at one time, so that'll come later once we complete all of our meetings here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, and we'll start the discussion of the Human Relations Commission. So as everyone may recall, we had discussed previously that the Human Relations Commission was created by consolidating a number of the village's boards and commissions almost 10 years ago, when we had consolidated a Community Relations, Board of Health, Persons with Disabilities, Fine Arts, I think that captures it all, into one commission. And when we did that, we looked at purposes in other communities and of similar types of commissions, and we also looked to bring in components or the primary responsibility of all of those individual bodies into one group. And that's how we created this purpose that's currently in the village code that has the 9 points. Now, as we discussed in the memorandum to the village board, our Human Relations Commission, as have Human Relations Commissions in other communities, somewhat struggled to kind of keep their work going forward in identifying tasks and functions. So what we did is we looked through the agendas and minutes of Human Relations Commissions in nearby communities just to provide an example of the type of projects that they've been working on. Deerfield, Highland Park are two that come to mind that we looked at. Evanston actually consolidated their Human Relations Commission into their Housing and Homelessness Commission several years ago. So these are the types of activities that those commissions and other communities are doing. These aren't necessarily what our recommendations as staff are. I think our recommendation was for the memo that we'd like to, once we get the Human Relations Commission filled, have them take a look at these responsibilities, look at the needs of the community, and then report back a work plan to the administration community on the direction that we should be going. So I'm going to leave this slide up here for discussion, and then similar to the Housing Commission, after the committee discusses this, we can then pull up ideas and suggestions from members of the public. Trustee Don, you're muted.
You're right, I was muted. Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Mike. I think this is a great list, and I appreciate the work that you guys did to kind of give us some direction to move forward. Before we get into some of the specific functions, I do think it would be nice, similar to the way we have kind of a broad mission statement for the Housing Commission, and we have actually mission statements for some of our other commissions. I think it would be nice for us to have a broad, overarching kind of mission statement for the Human Relations Commission that just kind of serves as a broad direction. And I looked at some of the material that was provided to us from some of the other surrounding communities, and some of them have this as well. And actually, it was a recommendation that came to us from, I believe it was from the League, and I think it's a good recommendation. And I have kind of a suggestion that I thought if it was okay, I could read, and then just to kind of give staff something to start with that I'm proposing, and that way Dan and Peter can kind of let me know if they agree with this at all, if that's okay. It would just be like it's like a 1 to 2 sentence thing that I think it would read something like, the Human Relations Commission is established to foster and promote an inclusive community where all racial, ethnic, religious, gender, sexual orientation, and cultural backgrounds feel welcome. The Human Relations Committee is also, sorry, I can't even read my own writing. It is also here to promote increased participation from all residents in our community life as well as community service. So just be like a 1 or 2 step overarching mission of this commission. And I wonder, Dan and Peter, how you feel about that.
I think that's great. No, I think that's good. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding. I think what you're saying is, because what we're going to do is recommend this to the total village, or the village board, that this is how we want both of these commissions to operate, and this document, whatever staff's going to create, will just have on the top of it the mission statement, followed by here's their purpose and
yes,
focus, and then from there we'd have our other board members tweak it. But I think that's a good start.
Yes. Okay, great. Yes, it's very consistent with what we have on the Housing Commission, right? We have a broad mission statement and then a purpose and then the functions they would focus on. And then we have the same thing here for human relations.
Yeah, Trustee Dodd, I think that absolutely says it absolutely correctly, and support it entirely.
I think it needs to be voice recorded, though, with you saying it, because it sounds much better coming from you than just reading it. You can pick up on the passion.
Thank you.
No problem.
And I took some of the language from our board, our board letter that went out to the community. So,
it's very good, Kathy. All serious. I mean, that's why I did mean it. That's very well said.
And then the other, so in terms of, thank you, Mike. That's the slide. I want to come back to the purpose. I think what's listed on the, can you go back to the previous slide? I think what's listed here, Mike, on the purpose page is a really nice consolidated list. And there's a lot here. Maybe just since we're on this slide, I'm jumping ahead, but I just think it's helpful. There was a suggestion that came through in our through public comment, which was instead of having this list, instead of using this list that we as a community came up with, the Department of the DOJ, the Department of Justice, has kind of a predefined list of what the Human Relations Commission should work on. And I wonder if we should be following that list as opposed to this list we came up with. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit, Mike, of, at the time that we put together, this list was a while ago before we had this direction.
Yeah, so then I'm going to share that summary memo again. And that was Gail Schechter had submitted to us the Department of Justice Human Relations Commission guidelines. There's about a 27-page PDF of material. But they do bullet point kind of what the purpose or function of a Human Relations Commission can be. First in the paragraph is to, quote, promote ways in which people and communities learn to get along and to safeguard equal opportunity for all by using the tools of fact-finding, staff training, information sharing, community education, mediation, cultural literacy, hate crime response, and conflict management. And then sub-bullets to that, you can see what they are, the 5 bullets there. Trustee Dodd, to your point, the ones that we had bulleted, previously in our village code were based on taking, the most important functions of each of those individual commissions that we had consolidated, and then looking at what human relations commissions had done in the area and bringing those together. It would certainly be appropriate to look at these DOJ guidelines and determine if this is, maybe a more appropriate framework, as it's a national framework that's recognized for a Human Relations Commission, or maybe it's a combination of the two. But it's certainly something worthy for the committee to consider.
So I see a lot of overlap here, Peter and Dan. It's not like I see that, what we have is, I see that there is a lot of consistency. It's just a matter of whether we feel like a better way for us to approach this is to really follow this this more broader, federal guidelines around what a Human Relations Commission should do. And if we feel we should go in that direction, then I think what we would want staff to do is just look at then what the purpose that we have listed on this page and make sure that all of these items bulleted are covered in one of these 4 bullets, in one of these 5 bullets, basically.
Trustee Dodd, I think that's really the idea that I would agree with. Let's have staff do somewhat of a comparison. See if I like what we've done. I think it really addresses some contributions that we don't currently do. But maybe there's some holes there that we don't really appreciate. So let's have a little time spent looking at the 2 perhaps side by side, and maybe it's an exercise in picking and choosing.
Great.
And I would say then to Mike and staff that, if we end up that we just like our own list of bullets, that's, I think it's an extra step that would help us make sure that we've addressed some of the feedback and we don't think that, and we can just make a decision on which one we think kind of really gets at what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, we'll do that comparison and analysis for the next committee meeting.
Okay.
I do want to go back to the functions of the Human Relations Commission in the PowerPoint, so let me bring that back up.
Okay, that was great. That was just where I was going to ask you to go. So I think we're all to some degree in agreement with the purpose and what's listed there. Now this is a little bit about the functions and this is what they would start to focus on. And I had a brief conversation with Mike about this, and I feel like what makes the most sense is for us to ask this Human Relations Commission to start out with looking at, doing some community engagement initiatives and discussions on racism, social equity, and community building. We see that happening in some of our other surrounding communities. So I think it's just a really good first step in terms of doing some listening, getting some understanding of what the community feels about these issues, and letting them do, a couple of these community engagement sessions, and then use those engagement sessions for them then to come back to us with what is a 2 to 3 year plan that they could really start to focus on to address what they've learned through these community engagement and initiatives and discussions. And that's what I'd be proposing in terms of the function that we put out initially to the board. Obviously, we would keep these other things that are listed here included, but the focus and the function for the first year might be more around community engagement. And I just wonder what you guys think about that.
I agree. I think, I also think these are 2 commissions, as we lay out these priorities, which we'll probably get 99% directionally right. There are also going to be a couple of commissions. These are going to be, given where their focus is, they're going to evolve as we form the groups and appoint residents.
Yes.
And so, as those commissions, they may decide to focus on 1 or 2 of whatever is they can accomplish during that time period, or whatever is the most need in the village. So I think we just need to be adaptable that way.
Yep.
Yeah, and I concur. We really have a blank slate here, and we do need to prioritize. But this may evolve in ways that we don't anticipate.
And Trustee Dodd, I'm going to pull up the suggestions from the community in regards to the Human Relations Commission. So give me one moment here.
Yep.
Actually, like, to that point, just again, so I know they're going to evolve, and we make sure it doesn't lose focus or get sidetracked and become something we didn't, the unintended consequence. Do these 2 commissions, would they technically report up to the administration committee of the board?
They would, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So unlike zoning and PUD, which is more of a land use.
Correct. So, to Trustee Dodd's point, we've received some really good feedback from the community on the human relations roles and responsibilities. I think this is a list we present to the commission once it's formed with members for their review and prioritization, and then to bring that back to the administration committee with their recommendations after they've had these community listening sessions and forums that'll help better inform where our needs are and where our priorities are. But this is a really good list, I think, for the commission to start looking at and reviewing as they move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these are great suggestions, and I think many of these will come out as well as we do these community engagement, discussions. The only one that has come up a couple times when I've reached out to other members of the community is the market the village to target audiences who are currently underrepresented in Wilmette. And I don't know if we think it would be too much to ask the Human Relations Commission to kind of look at that as well in tandem with kind of these listening sessions, these sessions that the community sessions are going to have. Do we think that that's too much on their plate for the first, 6 to 9 months, or how do people feel? Because that I do think has come up a number of times around, we want people to feel welcome into our community. We want people to come to our community. We want people to have businesses in their community. And could we do more to be marketing our village to get some more diversity? And so I guess I'm asking Dan and Peter, do you think for the, do you think something?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I'm sorry I missed all that preceded this, but let me tell you something that I think fits across this. When I look up something like affordable housing, I even see affordable housing with the word Wilmette. But when I look at it, there are examples of people who live there who are talking about it. They're elderly, so it's a senior, evidently. The seniors are all white, so there's not anything that would give anybody any idea that any other person could live there. When I think about human relations, it seems like that in the number of things I saw, human relations does have to concentrate on how do you even make people know that there's a possibility that they could move here. Because even now, when you look at affordable housing, everything you see about it is white people. So you wonder, and is it only for seniors? There were 2 places listed. So then I looked for Wilmette, just looked up Wilmette, looked around. Nothing that would draw me or anybody else to Wilmette, though I'm here, but I'm thinking, how do you, apart from the words, I like the idea of underrepresented folk in the community, but how do you also have that no matter what somebody is doing to look for, it could be housing. It looked like all the stuff about affordable housing, even though there's a definition, and it all looked like only if you were going to move to someplace south of Chicago would there be a place. And so thinking about that and thinking about the words, it seems like whoever is working in an area of human resources should also be thinking about how do you let anybody know? And only the people who are very interested in moving north would be the ones who are looking anyway. But if you don't ever see anything at all, it indicates it's open. It's open house.
So, Mr. Gilmore, I'm going to jump in for a second here. I'm sorry. I know you had trouble with the technology earlier, but the meeting's not technically open to public comment now, and to facilitate the committee's discussion,
okay.
So,
I'm sorry.
We'll mark those comments in the record, and we'll make sure that we work with you for the next meeting to make sure you're able to access via phone or computer so that you can participate at that time. So I appreciate your comments, and we'll get those into the minutes.
It's actually both housing and human relations.
Yes.
It's very, very much that.
Yeah, so we do.
Okay, the guy was calling him Dan, but Dan and Van sound so much alike, so I could see it. So
I know.
whatever you said, I agree with. You said it much better than I did.
Yeah, so we apologize for that, but we wanted you to have the opportunity to speak, Van, but I think we want to kind of move through this now to get feedback from the actual members on the commission. Okay, so where we were was just, could you bring back up that slide, the slide of the feedback, Mike, from, the list of all the feedback we received from the members? So this is the full list that's here. I think we had, just to kind of bring us back, I think we had said that many of these items we think will fall out of the Human Relations Commission as they work through these. We'll be sure that this list is given to this commission. But the question is to Trustee Sullivan as well as Trustee Barrow, do we feel we should, in terms of what we want the committee to focus on in the, when they are first formed, obviously we said we wanted them to do some more community engagement and discussions on racism and really start to unpack what we could be doing. And the second question, the question is, do we feel that's enough and that's what we want them to start with? Or do we feel them also looking at how we could market the village to these target audiences who are currently unrepresented in Wilmette to create more diversity in our community? Do we think we want to add that as a priority initially? That's really the question.
And, I think my thinking is that let's get this commission formed and up and working before we actually take it out for marketing.
Okay.
The marketing piece is a difficult one, an important one, very important one, and that's what Mr. Gilmer was just speaking to. It's really important to communicate it, but let's get up and running before we start basically trying to sell it.
I agree with Peter on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Then I think, so then I think we kind of feel that we have some clarity around this, the functions that are listed here, and we'll basically list community engagement initiatives as kind of the first one for them to focus on. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Mike, is that okay with you, Mike Raymond?
Yes, that's good direction.
Okay, perfect. That gives you what you guys need to kind of, okay. All right, so now I think we can move on to more the composition of, so we're off then, just the actual roles and the functions of the commissions. Now we'll move on to kind of the more broader composition in terms of the diversity of the membership, the composition of the membership, and things like of these various commissions. And this will be more broadly, this is more broad than just the Human Relations and Housing Commission.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Trustee Dodd. So in our village code currently, a handful of our boards and commissions have identified preferred or required backgrounds and experience that we seek to fill those boards and commissions with, and then others do not. And it doesn't seem that there was a lot of rhyme or reason as to why some have those suggested required backgrounds and others do not. So it's our suggestion as staff for consistency and also to help as we're looking to make appointments that we do have preferred backgrounds or experience for all of our boards and commissions. So this first slide here shows those boards and commissions that already have requirements or preferences in the village code. I'm going to bring our attention to the Human Relations Commission since we've been talking about that. We would suggest maybe making some additions to the current one in Human Relations. It's pretty broad already. It doesn't specifically capture senior citizens or veterans, especially the veterans with the American Legion outpost closing in the community. This may be an opportunity to bring in somebody with that background as well on the commission. And in keeping in mind here, these are just suggestions. If we have, let's look at environmental and energy. If we have already 4 members or 5 members who have experience with energy conservation, we may not be looking for another member with that. We may be looking for somebody with a different, more broad-based experience in pollution control. So this is to help provide a framework for the village president and the village board while we're making appointments to these boards and commissions. So these are the existing ones. I'm going to move to the next slide on our suggestions, and then I think we can have a more broad-based discussion. So these boards and commissions here do not already have suggested backgrounds or experience in the village code. Our recommendation would not to make anything a requirement, but just as we're looking to fill these with residents, that we would want to look for residents, for example, on the Housing Commission, that have affordable housing expertise, that may have real estate expertise, development or construction expertise, financing, legal, urban planning, really to provide a diverse and broad range of background and expertise to the deliberations of each of these boards and commissions. And that's particularly important on our land use commissions as well as Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals to have a nice broad background as we're reviewing and hearing applications. So Trustee Dodd, I don't know if you'd like me to go back to the first slide on existing where we had made a recommendation on expanding some of the human relations requirements, or if you want to start here on these newer recommendations.
Yeah, can you go back to the first slide?
Yes.
So maybe Dan and Peter, do you have any feedback on kind of what's listed there for any of these? I get maybe more specifically around the human relations.
I think it's good directionally and gives an idea of who would be best served. But I also think we just need a little bit of flexibility that just because you don't have this training or experience, that doesn't necessarily eliminate you. If we have village residents that really have a passion to be on this, it should be considered. I think my view is when we staff this, obviously we want a diverse group that represents all voices. It's not just one, all the same voices where it becomes an advocacy group. I think that'll be important because and that'll be the challenge of the board and the president of the village to really staff it appropriately. I did like one of the residents' suggestions of having, I think they said having younger people that join this. And I mentioned to Mr. Brayman, I thought, why not open it up to Loyola and New Trier to see if they would each give a representative of one of their student body to join this. I think that'd be good education. It has to be a resident of Wilmette, and whether we make them a voting member or not, I think that could give a different perspective and a good learning experience for some of our up-and-coming Wilmette residents.
And I would just add to that the Village's Youth Commission, when it was in existence, did have student representatives. So we have some precedent for that, and from what I understand, that did work well and was a good opportunity for those students to participate in local government.
Yeah, I think Dan's suggestions are right on point. We do want to have a variety of voices and expertise on all of these commissions. A place for one high school student would be an interesting and probably very valuable voice for all of us older people to hear. We should stay focused on people with expertise and background, but the desire to be engaged is an important one, and we can't lose track of that.
So I agree with what Dan and Peter both said. I wonder if it would be. I think it might be nice to have this list basically preferred backgrounds for each particular commission, and I think that's important to have. But I just wonder if there should be an overarching, statement, which is, we look for our commissions to have a broad mix of residents within our community, and that broad mix is, age-based, family-based, senior citizens, racially diverse, religious diverse. I think that, some of the feedback we've gotten when we started this whole process was just, really making sure that these commissions are a representation of our community. And so I think this is showing diversity of membership as it relates to background, but it's not addressing other diversity. I think it would be nice to have a broad statement that says, as we're looking to select members to these commissions, we are also looking for this, diversity among this membership. And what do you guys think about that?
I think that's a very fine idea, Trustee Dodd. Fine idea. Consistent with what we've been trying to do with the other two commissions.
I agree.
And then the other question I have is just, I'm struggling with the Human Relations Commission, just in terms of, is, background in terms of, professional background, what we're looking for there, or on this, is it on this particular commission, and are we looking for more specifically, religious diversity, gender diversity, and should we, we're looking to have a youth on there, we're looking to have a senior citizen, we're looking for somebody with a disability, we're looking, and should that be specifically laid out for the Human Relations Commission? Because I feel like this is focused so much on the professional background, and I'm just not sure, again, we need to tackle this issue, and I don't know, I think people who are experiencing these particular racial issues might be in a better position to help us tackle it. And so I'd like to add it, I guess. In the specific situations for human relations, I'd like to propose that we ask staff to look at potentially adding some language in addition to this, which is some of the diversity we'd be looking for.
Go ahead, Mike, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, as we come back at the next meeting, with that kind of focused mission purpose of the Human Relations Commission, we can come up with a suggestion in terms of that preferred background and expertise and meld those two together.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Okay, is there anything on the slide? Can we go to the next slide just to specifically talk about the housing, and just, is there anything that you guys would like to address on this slide? Otherwise, I think it looks good to me, but. I'm going to say, hearing none, we can go forward. That would be
very good. This would be a part of the committee's final recommendation to the board, where we would amend the code for each of these boards or commissions to establish these as suggested or preferred. They're not required, and you don't have to have that experience, but it helps to provide some direction. So that'll be a part of our final report here.
Perfect.
So moving on to composition, term limits and length of term. This is a discussion that had come up at the outset. So what we did was some research of all of our nearby communities and what their term lengths look like in comparison to ours, and what their term limits look like, just to see if we're in the same ballpark. A couple of things to point out here. We are one of a couple of our neighbors who have term limits, so some do, some do not, but those that do are generally consistent with the term limits we have. The Board of Fire and Police Commissioners is a state statute-created board, so the length of the term and the number of members is set by statute. The term limits, the 3 terms, is not. So that's a local decision we made. But 3 years and 3 members is based on state statute. So looking at the research, and I think Trustee Sullivan had made this comment at the last meeting, that it's beneficial to have different lengths of term so that there's overlap with new village presidents and new village boards. I think makes a lot of sense. So from a staff perspective, we feel pretty comfortable with where we're already at in terms of length of term and term limits. So we're not necessarily recommending any changes at this time. So if there's no question.
The one thing that caught me off, why do we not have term limits on the pension boards? Remind me why that's sort of a good...
So Yeah, that's another one that's a state statute type board. So the pension boards are comprised of 5 members. 3 are elected by the pension beneficiaries, and 2 are appointed by the village. So the state doesn't have any term limits for the 3 that are appointed by the pension beneficiaries. So there's consistency in that regard. And also these boards, one of their primary functions is to handle disability applications and cases, and those take years. So, it's important that there's consistency in the board members when you're hearing those types of cases. So it makes sense that there wouldn't be term limits.
Okay.
Mike, can you speak to, so that the community is aware of it, of, why we feel that for zoning and appearance review and the bill, why we feel 5 years is, it's just longer than the others, and I think we've got some good reasons. I think it'd be helpful for the people listening to understand why we think that's appropriate.
Sure, and Trustee Sullivan may be able to help me out since he was on the zoning board for several years. But the appearance review and the zoning board are really detailed type of review bodies, and there's a really steep learning curve. So it takes several years before you're really fully up and running on those boards. So 5 years, I think, makes sense. By year 3, maybe, and Trustee Sullivan can speak to it more, then you're probably starting to feel pretty comfortable with the process. And then if it's only 4 years or 3 years, then you're off the board. So 5 years makes sense, and it was fairly consistent with our comparables. Actually, the zoning board, almost all the comparables were at 5 years as well, except for Lake Forest and Lake Bluff. And Lake Forest is 2 years across the board on their aldermanic positions as well as all their boards and commissions. So it's just the way that they operate. So we think it makes sense, but I'd be curious if Trustee Sullivan has anything to add.
I mean, I think you said it well. It does. It takes a period of time, especially if you're not in, architecture or in zoning type work. It takes a period of time to get up to speed, and I also think then there's a consistency of what's being accepted and where we make variances around our code. So it's a much more productive meeting, and the board member or the zoning board members can really dive in. I think, even John, who I think is on this call, John might echo and say, where does it really help his group? And we're fortunate. I think we're fortunate that we have, John and Lisa Roberts and a team that really educates us, but that's not consistent in most communities.
Okay.
Yeah, and I personally think that the term of years is appropriate. I served on both the Plan Commission for 8 years and the Transportation Commission for a number of years. The fact is, it just takes a while. It takes a while to learn and to get a sense of what you're doing and to appreciate what's been done in the past. And I think anything less than the number of years that we have currently for our terms is not a good direction to go in. I know that might create more turnover, but I think that there's a level of expertise that serves the village and serves the board very well.
Good.
Okay. But I think we'll hold the status quo on this. I'm going to move on to composition, number of members. So this, again, we looked at our comps just to compare ourselves to our neighbors to make sure that we are in the ballpark of what seemed to make sense in other communities. The one recommendation that we have as staff is to look at the Historic Preservation Commission and reduce the membership from 9 to 7. This was a discussion that we had brought up a couple of years ago to the Administration Committee, and the committee had asked us to bring it to the Historic Preservation Commission for their input. At that time, they did believe it was appropriate to reduce membership from 9 to 7. 9 is a lot. It's hard to get good committee work done sometimes when you've got that many members. And the difference between historic preservation and environment and energy, for example, is that environment and energy is really a working commission. Those commissioners are doing all the legwork to create the Greenest Region Compact. Historic preservation is more like a land use commission, like a zoning board or a appearance review board, where you're reviewing applications. So you don't need those extra members to do that legwork. So we think it would be appropriate. And actually, in reviewing the history, the Historic Preservation Commission Wilmette used to have 7 members, and they had petitioned the board to increase that to 9 at a time when they were looking to add 2 members with media relations experience to help publicize their activities and get the word out. So there was a specific reason, I think this was back in the 1990s, to do that. Now, the village has a much more robust communications team and strategy in place, and we're able to help boards and commissions if they need it in that regard. So we think it would be appropriate to reduce the historic preservation from 9 to 7. And we did just talk a little bit about human relations, and I think there's a decision point to be made whether, if we're going to add student members, whether it's 9 appointed adult members plus 2 student members who wouldn't be voting members, or if it's 7 adult members plus 2 student members who could or could not be voting members. And then we don't have to make that decision today, but that's something else that we should have on our radar.
Well, Mike, let me jump in and ask this. Did I recall reading somewhere that perhaps staff put out some study and the like that suggested that when you go beyond 7 members, you lose a certain amount of efficiency?
Yes.
And so I guess the question, and really for both Dan and Kathy here, is given the increased role that we've just spoken about and the importance of the role of the Housing Commission, perhaps that really should be 7 rather than 5, and perhaps Human Relations should be 7 rather than 9. I'm not sure I see the argument for 9, other than including a lot of people, but it certainly seems to me that 5 for housing, given what's going to be on their plate, 5 for housing seems like that might be a little small.
Yeah, I would add, just on the housing one, they're not as a working commission like the environmental and energy is. So much of the housing work is done at the staff level or a consultant level, and then it's brought to the commission for review, recommendations, and input. So there is a difference there. I think what you say in human relations makes sense from 9 to 7, and it may make sense to hold housing at 5 and maybe human relations at 7 initially as we start to work these up in terms of making sure we're recruiting members and have a good pool, and then reviewing membership again at the administration committee level, based on feedback from the commissions after a year or so to see if we should then increase the membership after some experience.
I'm not wedded to any given number, but it seems to me that if we're speaking about having a broad group of people of expertise advising us on housing, particularly housing matters, an additional 2 people would be all for the better. I think that's something that we as a commission and the trustees ought to be giving some thought to. Housing strikes me as too small.
Yeah, you know what? In hearing what Trustee Barrow said, I tend to agree. I mean, we just talked about we've come up with a really nice, comprehensive list of what we think the Housing Commission can work on, and there's a lot of things there. And it's obviously also an incredibly important commission to the community. And given that the average of counts, as many of the other communities have, is higher than 5, I'd be inclined to go up to 7 on that as well. I'd be interested in hearing from John Adler in terms of his perspective on that. And then in addition, in terms of human relations, I'd be in support of going with 7 adult. I think, and then putting 2 youth on there, so maybe the total number of members is 9, but 2 of those are youth. To me, feels like the right thing to do. I'm not sure about the voting, non-voting. I think we want to empower our youth to get involved, and so I think they should have the opportunity to vote. I have to be honest, because we're trying to teach them the importance as well of getting involved in community service. That'd be my perspective on those 2.
Yeah, I actually think that's a pretty cool idea.
I think they definitely should have a vote, because if you make them non-voting, then they may not be as engaged.
Exactly, and it gives the impression we don't care about their opinion, and we do.
on the numbers, and I understand, why we have 7 for planning and zoning and because we as a board look, what zoning reviews for us is sort of a binding direction for where the board has to do it. If we get a negative recommendation, we're going to need a supermajority of 5 voting members. So I understand why that should be at 7. Though I agree it's harder to corral a larger group, but I do think, when you look at the Environment and Energy commissions with the 9 and what they've done since we've been on the board, they haven't said anything to us to vote on, so anything they bring to the board I've not seen where it requires us to have a majority vote or a supermajority vote. The 9 is really, it's how many volunteers can they get to bring ideas to us, and what are the resources to work on things. And the coal tar, what they worked on was the big one, and they brought it to the board and said, we recommend not putting a moratorium or prohibiting the use of coal tar. So that's where I look at the difference. Is it that much of a big deal having 7 versus 9? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does.
And I think in this one, if I'm hearing what from the public, obviously people want to get involved with human relations and the housing to work on recommendations that the board should pursue. They're not going to be reviewing applications that they're going to have to vote on, and if we get a vote 5-4, what does that mean? Does that make, so.
So does that lean you, Dan, towards it sounds like that it sounds like you are liking the 7 and 9 for, you like the 7 for the zoning and the appearance review, obviously, in the plan. Does that lean you toward 5 for housing? I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Or does that?
And again, I sort of missed what Mike had said about the 5 and what the work does, but if we're sort of redirecting where the housing goes and sort of, would it be more beneficial to have 9? And actually, where I look to get the opinion, again, I look at the environmental, that Julie Wolf leads now, and what's his name, Chris Dunn led it before. Having 9 members help because, sometimes it's easier to get 5 to 6 people at a meeting versus, if you only have 7 people, you might only get 3 to 4 at a meeting.
So Mike, can you speak to that? So for example, on the EEC, do we feel like, it sounds like you felt like 9 was the right number, and that's what Julie, as the chair, and that commission felt was appropriate?
Yeah, well, the EEC didn't review the number of members because we didn't believe a change was needed. I think the difference between EEC with 9 and you could say human relations with 9 is those are going to function as actual working commissions where the resident members are doing a lot of the legwork, and staff is helping to support that work and move that work forward. The Housing Commission isn't going to be that type of working commission. Like, you're not creating a Greenest Region Compact. When we look at the Affordable Housing Plan, the comprehensive plan, the commission is going to be working with consultants on this. So the consultant is doing a lot of that legwork, taking direction from the commission, reporting back to the commission, and the consultant working with staff. So I think going from 5 to 9 on housing probably is not needed. If there's a desire to go to 7, I think you can make that argument. But I also think 5 works as well, given how that commission, we envision it working with staff and with consultants moving forward.
Well, let me ask this. Dan and Peter, let me just go through each of these just so I understand, because I think, Dan and Peter, are you in support of the Housing Commission going from 5 to 7? Yes or no?
Yeah, Kathy,
Yes.
I'm strongly in favor of that.
And Dan, sorry.
Right. Peter, I didn't understand what you said. You're supportive of that, or you're struggling increasing that?
No, I'm strongly in favor of increasing housing from 5 to 7.
Yeah, no, I agree with Peter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, Mike, we're telling you we'd like to increase the Housing Commission from 5 to 7.
Got it.
And then I think what we're saying is we agree with you that we can move the Historic Preservation Commission down from 9 to 7, I believe. I'm looking for nods from Peter and Dan. And then for now, we'll leave EEC and Human Relations at 9 because of what you were stating, which is these are working groups that are doing a lot of work.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
And as part of that 9, yeah, that's helpful. As part of that 9, is that including 2 youth members, or are there 2 youth members?
Yes, that's including 2 youth members. So yes, I believe it should be 7 plus 2, and I mean 9 total.
Right.
But
I agree.
We all have consensus. I believe Dan and Peter and I have consensus that we would like the 2 youth to be voting members.
I agree. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, very good. We'll include that as part of our final report to the board as well. So that was the last item up for discussion here. So in terms of the next steps, I think we have clear direction on what we need to bring back to the committee in terms of the Human Relations Commission. So we will do that at our next meeting. I think the Housing Commission, we've got clear direction on what the final recommendation will be to the village board, as well as with our membership, that we can consider those accomplished or put a pin in for now as we move forward. So the next step will be schedule a committee meeting for mid to late August, where we'll continue the human relations discussion and really primarily focus on the appointment and selection process of our members. And as part of that meeting, we will have a memo from the Corporation Council regarding legality surrounding the appointment process.
Perfect. You know, in terms of another next step, Mike, I do want to acknowledge, I thought one of the feedback we got around the timing of the meeting is appropriate in terms of middle of the day. It can be hard. We've obviously received a significant amount of public comment on this topic, so I do feel that people are having the opportunity to speak. But I do think it might be nice for hopefully that might be our last meeting before we present something to the board. It might be nice to see if we could try to find a time to do it in the evening. Just to address the feedback we received. And maybe that's not possible, but at least as you come back to us with potential dates, if you could look at that.
Sure, certainly.
Very good.
Okay, so wow, I forgot that. Going back to the agenda, I'm sorry about that. Right, because I think we're done with that, correct?
We're done with that, yes.
Okay, so is there any new business to cover?
Nothing for now.
Okay, so then now we could open it up to public comment if anybody would like to speak to us on a matter that was not on the agenda. So obviously if it's a matter regarding the topics we just discussed, we've closed public comment on that. But if there's anything, if there's any member that would like to speak to us on a item that's not on the agenda, please, let's see. Let me first ask Alex if we got any comments through email, public comments through email?
We have not any emails that haven't been covered already.
Okay, so then I guess we could ask members on, how about on YouTube Live, if anybody would like to address us again on an item that's not on the agenda?
There are several comments on YouTube Live, but it was basically just comments that were made while you guys were having your discussion. So in regards to everything we've already talked about.
Okay, and so those comments that were made while we were having our discussion, will those be included in our meeting materials so that all of us could see them?
Yeah, I have recorded them on a separate document.
Okay, great. Okay, and so then is there anybody on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak to us on an item that's not, that was not covered on the agenda? Okay, I think I'm going to assume that most people were here to speak to us on the items on the agenda, if that's okay with everybody. Do you think we need to give people a few more minutes, Mike, or do you think we're okay to adjourn?
Why don't we give it about 20 seconds or so, and that'll also allow us to make sure that there's no other comments on YouTube Live for items not on the agenda.
Okay. Okay. And I apologize, I wasn't expecting comments while we were speaking. Okay.
while we're waiting, and we'll, I'll just remind everybody that as we move forward here, we'll continue with the notifying individuals who have expressed interest in following this topic. We'll notify them of the next meeting date via email, and then when agenda materials are posted, we'll also email those out to that email list as well.
Okay. So I think we're okay to.
Yep. I think we're.
Can I get a motion from somebody to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
And can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, so Mike, can you please call the roll on the motion to adjourn the meeting?
Trustee Sullivan?
Aye.
Trustee Barrow?
Aye.
Trustee Dodd?
Aye. Okay,
All right.
so the meeting is adjourned at 3:52. Thank you very much again to everybody who submitted public comment, or for those of you who have hung in there with us for somewhat of a long meeting, but I do think we accomplished a lot. Excited. It feels like we've really got what we need around